In this presentation, we're going to take a look at the pay bills form. In other words, we've entered bills in the past. Now we're going to be paying them using the pay bills feature. Let's get into it with Intuit's QuickBooks Online. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars file. Before we go any further, let's first take a look at our flowchart that's going to be in the desktop version. So we're going in the desktop version just to take a look at the flowchart. When we typically pay for bills, when we pay for our expenses, as we did in the prior presentation, we could simply pay them off either with a check or some type of electronic transfer and enter that information directly into the register. However, we could also go through the process of entering the bill here and then paying the bill. So in our second month of operations, we'll run some of our normal kind of expenses that we did in the prior presentation through this process. This time we just want to show this process so you can see it in the first month of operations. So we have entered a bill in the past. That's going to increase the accounts payable, what we owe a vendor, and the other side goes to either an expense or inventory for what we purchased. Then we're going to pay it, and in essence, when we pay it, we're basically making checks at that point in time. But we can make multiple checks at the same time, and QuickBooks will indicate separately that we have that pay bill feature, which will be decreasing the checking account, obviously, because we're basically writing a check, and the other side will be decreasing the accounts payable, the account representing that we owe someone money. Let's take a look at that. We're going to go back to our data. Let's open up our reports first. So I'm going to open up our reports by going to the reports down below. And let's just open up the trial balance for now. So I'm going to scroll down to, or just open up here, the trial balance and select that item. So we have the trusty trial balance. I'm going to scroll back up top and change the dates up top from 01/01/20 to 12/31/20. We're going to go ahead and run that report. I'm going to duplicate the tab up top by right-clicking on it and then duplicating it. So now we have the trial balance on the right. I'm going to go back to the left now. Going to go to our plus button. We're looking through the forms. We're looking at the items that are typically going to be a payout situation. We have a similar kind of layout here in a list type of format where first you would enter the bill, then you would pay the bill. Now again, you typically might pay the bill with a check, so it might be a check that we're paying with. However, we're going to go through the pay bill feature, which is going to show us that it's going to be paying something specifically out of accounts payable. So we're going to say pay the bill. And then we have the sorting of the bills down here. So what's going to happen, it's going to come out of the checking account. Then we have everything that's basically in the accounts payable down below. You can sort these items. You can sort them and they typically will be sorted by the due date. So you can organize the items that will be there. We only have one at this point in time. So if you're talking about a larger type of organization, you may have a job that's specifically refined down to simply accounts payable, which would deal a lot with organizing and sorting these bills and determining which bills to be paid when. So we have the due date item, we have the payee, and then the opening balance. This is a bill that had been entered. If we check that bill off, then we have the payment amount that's going to be on the right. We're going to say that we're going to pay the entire bill. So if we were going to pay less than the entire bill, we can obviously populate something other than the entire bill. Now, if you are going to be printing these checks, or if this is a check format, then of course the check number will be up top. So we'll have the check number up top. Then if you're going to print the checks from QuickBooks, you're going to have the first check number here. You'll have the first check number, then you will take the checks. The checks will be pre-printed checks, so they will already have a check number on it. What you want to do is make sure that they tie out. They should tie out the check number in the system, and on the checks, those two should tie out. And if they do, that's an internal control that you want to make sure those two tie out. That's why you have separate checks that will be printed. Then you put those into the printer in whatever format they need to be printing correctly. You may want to test a blank sheet of paper before you do that to make sure that you have it in the printer in the correct format. To print in the correct place. To do that, I would mark a piece of paper. This is the top, this is the bottom, face down, face up. Put it in the printer. Make sure you know how the printer is printing on that piece of paper. Then put the checks in there and print them. Otherwise, you'll have to void the checks or something like that and print them again. Now, you may be using this feature and basically handwriting the checks. You can still do that. You can use this feature and basically handwrite the checks, and you'll have the same kind of thing. The checkbook that you're writing in, where you're going to mail out the checks in just a normal kind of fashion, should line up to the check numbers that are in the system still, and then it should assign out the check numbers even though you're not printing the actual checks. If for some reason you're using this pay bills function and basically possibly calling in the checks or something like paying them electronically after you're using the pay bill type function here, you could still do that. You might want to put like other in the check number or simply delete the check number so that you don't have a check number. That will allow it so that the next time you do use an actual check, it will populate the check properly with the next check in line. So you don't want to assign a check number if you're paying in some other way, such as a telephone or electronic transfer of some kind. On the printing options, you can print it now or print later. We have the options down here. If I select the drop up, we can have the save it. We can then save and print, or I can say save and close. I'm going to be using the save and close. I'm going to say save and close. And it says one bill has been marked paid. So that sounds good. Now, if you were to then print them later and you wanted to then gather the checks and print them later, you can go into the plus box up here, the new item, and then you would want to print the checks down below. Sometimes I like to check this in the check register. So then once I use this feature, then I would go down to the accounting down below, say, okay, what does this look like in the check register? So if I would then open the check register for cash and go to the view register here, and then I'll close the hamburger so we can see a bit more of it. I'm then going to search by type here. So I'm going to search by reference type. So then we have the check and then the pay bill. So notice that this pay bill item is basically a check. We have the check number 1, check number 2, although it's going to reference it as a pay bill type of item. Also note I put the date here as January 9th. And I'm going to say that I want to adjust that date. I'm going to say I want to put it in there as of January 30th. So I'm going to go into this pay bill. So I'm going to select it. And I want to edit. I could edit it right here. I could go to the editing function down below. That'll take us to the pay bill. Then I'm just going to change the date to January 30th, 2020. So I'm going to change it to January 30th, 2020. So it's kind of in alignment with the order that we've been going in. Then I'm going to say save and close. And we get this warning, the transaction you are editing is linked to others. Are you sure you want to do it? Are you sure you want to modify it? And that's because it's part of the accounts payable link. We entered the bill and it linked the bill to the pay bill feature. But we just changed the date, so we should be okay. So I'm going to say yes, it should be okay. So we're going to save that. Notice if we needed to change the date, we could also get to that same information by going to the reports. So if I went to the reports on the right, I'm going to close the hamburger and make this a little bit larger. Let's take a look at the checking account then. If we go into the checking account, selecting the checking account, we want to go down and note we have the pay bill. It's on there as the 30th. Note it's still a check. In brackets we have check here. It's a check, but it's a pay bill check, special check, meaning it means specifically that unlike other checks, this one paid down the accounts payable. So that's what that, so anytime you see that pay bill form, you're going to say, all right, that paid down the accounts payable. And here's the AP, and obviously if we needed to change the date or something like that, we could have done it from this format rather than the register. We could go into here, go directly into the form. Here's the pay bill form, and we could have changed the date in the same fashion. I'm going to close this back out. The other side, I'm going to go back up top, is going to be to the accounts payable. So we'll then go to the accounts payable. That would be a liability account. Notice both of these accounts are on the balance sheet. Liability account of accounts payable now at 0. It's been closed out. I can open out the liability account, and there is the pay bill for the $15,000. This should typically be what we should see in the accounts payable. It goes up and then it goes back down. We should be able to basically match out the accounts payable. We can also see the more detail in accounts payable in the accounts payable or vendor detail reports, as well as if we went to, let's go to the first tab, open up the hamburger. If we go into this expense section here and we sort our vendors, we can see the detail of what vendors we owe here as well. And if we owe it any particular vendor, we can then go into the detail for that particular vendor and see the detail. I'm going to minimize this side so we can see more. We can minimize the hamburgers, useful here. And we can see all we have here is an expense item that we had to this particular vendor. So here's our trial balance that we have so far. So you can take a look at that. We'll try to print these trial balances out so you can take a look at them after each section and line up your numbers with them.